Hey everyone, welcome to the Experience Podcast. And this week it's just me. We're doing another solo episode. I don't think I've done one in a while, but with the holidays coming up and people are busy, they're taking finals and school related activities. Tough to find guests this week, and I had something to talk about anyway, so I figure I'll talk about it. Everyone's kind of talking about it. Maybe not by the time this comes out. Which will be next week. So, yeah, it should still be in the news. But this week I'm going to be talking, you've seen the title of the episode, you clicked on it. We're talking Spider-Man No Way Home. The third installment in the kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe and Sony combo platter. Third one directed by John Watts, who I don't think anyone could pick out of a crowd. No offense, John Watts. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's kind of, I guess, got his own style, but a lot of what you see there is what Marvel and Sony want in the movie. So I'll talk about kind of general thoughts first, and then I'll go into some of the spoilers that I'm sure people are interested in. Maybe not interested in hearing me about it or hearing me talk about it, but interested in general. And so, that's going to be the episode. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't remember how long the last short, solo episode I did is probably about 20 minutes. That's probably how far I'll get. Again, you clicked on the episode, so you know more than I do. It's like seeing in the future, right? And then, next week, I'll try to bring a guest back on. No guarantees, obviously. But if not, then maybe I'll do some sports stuff or something like that in its place. Or I have other things to talk about, but I'm usually not one to talk about myself. If anyone's listened to the podcast before, they know that already. So we'll see how long the solo series can last and has to last. Right. So I'll just talk about. We'll just go into the movie. I'm going to talk about like the theater experience first, just because I'm taking my notes here. Just because it was an interesting experience. So I live in a small. Again, if anyone's listening to the podcast, I live in a small town in the Northeast. I'll just say in New York, in the state, and not a lot of people, but it's like there's one theater, if you don't want to drive like an hour away, there's one theater in the city, and there were some college-age students kind of sitting a couple rows behind me, giggling and laughing at basically the wrong parts, so I'm pretty sure they're telling jokes or whatever. A little disruptive, but overall it was a good experience. This is maybe, I've only seen a few films, since the pandemic started. I saw West Side Story a couple weeks ago, and that theater was pretty empty. There was no one there, which I guess is reflective in the overall box office now that I look at it. But the in the Spider-Man No Way Home, pretty crowded, probably about 3/4 full, which, again, it's a small town. I don't know, even before the pandemic, how often, they would sell out a theater or not. I saw it on a Wednesday night, like at 7 o'clock though, so a night showing, but it's still like in the middle of the week, so I don't know in a normal setting, like a few years ago, if that would have been a sellout for a movie like this, or maybe there's more people seeing this movie just because it's a good chance to get out, even with the pandemic in flux right now, but you still see people that want to get out and do things. So I was a bit surprised how crowded it was. I still got a great seat though. But yeah, there's some people that are a couple rows, they're laughing at, not to get into the specifics, but there's some sad moments that they're laughing at, and they're talking about other stuff. And actually, I'm not even sure if they were college age. And I think about it, because they were talking to some younger people a few rows up after the movie. They weren't talking during the movie. That would have been really bad. But after the movie, they're talking to some guys who looked like, maybe late middle school, early high school. So maybe I'm thinking now they were maybe high schoolers, because also the college is probably out on winter break right now. Maybe they could just be locals, which I'm sure a lot of them are. But yeah, they could even be high schoolers. I think I saw them drive out, but so I don't know. But anyway, in general, try to, if you haven't been to the movies in a while just because of the situation in the world, just try to be respectful of other people in the theater. That's all I'm asking. it didn't take away from the movie drastically, obviously, but I don't really get super bothered by that. I'm usually pretty mellow on that sort of thing, but perhaps, it's just a good idea to remember you're not sitting in your living room or basement or whatever. You're in a public setting is all I'm getting at. Not a big deal again. It's just something I noticed. I was like, yeah, this isn't meant to be a funny part, is it? The characters are crying. All right. So anyway, that's the theater experience part of this podcast. For anyone else who's wondering, but overall, it's a good theater experience. It's kind of a small theater. They just renovated it like a year ago, so they added some of those recliner seats, which I've always been kind of iffy on. I don't know how comfortable it is to just be completely leaning back, and then you try to get in this middle, like the halfway through, like kind of recline, but it still feels a little weird, and it's like I don't know the best way to do it. Leave a comment, if you're actually listening to this episode. How do you sit in the recliner seats? Do you not recline at all? Do you go full recline where you're basically like twisting your head upward just so you could see the movie? Because this theater does not have a super deep, it's not like super deep stadium seating where, it goes where you're sitting super high up and there's super high stairs. Like it's a very, there's still an incline, an incline to the slope, but it's very small. So it's a very small incline. So if you if you recline too much, I fear that you won't be able to see everything, especially if you have someone sitting in front of you. Just something to think about. Recline seating. And I think there's like 4 auditoriums in this theater, and I think that's the one that has the reclining seats. But because it just happens to show like the biggest movies, and they put, Clifford in the other theaters. But another thing I wanted to mention, sorry, I haven't gotten to the movie yet, which I guess is good because we got to fluff out this episode, right? Got to give you guys the content that we normally give, and it's a solo episode, so bear with me. But another thing I noticed was there was the walls are not as thick as you would hope in theaters, and you would think that they'd be better at this, but I could hear some like music cues and some banging, and I was like, oh, is this something bad gonna happen? No, wait, no. It took me a second to realize that, like, oh, it's from the other theater next door, or it's from the other auditorium next door, the other screen. So, I understand that they can't afford to keep the 2 different auditoriums super, soundproof, but it definitely impacted me. At one point in the movie, I was like, oh, shoot, what is this music cue? Oh, okay, it's coming from the other one. Anyway, that's the theater experience. So now I should talk about the movie itself that I saw. And it's Spider-Man No Way Home. It's got your usual cast of characters. Obviously, Iron Man isn't in it. I guess he wasn't in Far From Home either. But anyway, you don't have... but you saw in the trailer, maybe you didn't see in the trailer, we got Doctor Strange in it. That's our kind of checkbox of a event. Avengers got to show up in the movie. You got to have at least one crossover to prove that it's in the MCU. Pretty much every Marvel movie at this point has that. I'm trying to think. I guess Eternals didn't have that. Well, I guess they mentioned Thanos and they talk about that other stuff. But for the most part, like Shang-Chi had Benedict Wong, who also makes an appearance in this movie. And it looks like, based on the trailer for the new Doctor Strange movie, he's going to be a big part of that, which, can never get enough Benedict Wong. But anyway, enough about Benedict Wong, because he's only, it's not a big part of this movie. But the movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, it's pretty good. I really enjoyed it. It's got a lot of, I've seen the word nostalgia used online, and, but it does have that, but I think it does a good job of incorporating it into the story. It's not just throwing stuff at you just for the sake of it, just because, like, hey, you like this, whatever. It actually, like, uses characters in a way that makes sense to the story and to the universe that they are currently living in, and that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is in. I don't want to talk too much in depth about the spoilers until later on, just in case, if you haven't seen it yet, which, I guess if you're listening to this podcast until now, I don't know, you're not going to see it. okay? But okay, I'll just go into spoilers because it's really hard to talk, and I'm sure you've seen this, from other if you've seen another like Spider-Man review, but it's really tough to talk about this movie or even amongst your friends like without spoiling anything because the kind of like the fun about this movie, and this reminds me of another movie I can't remember off the top of my head, but like the greatest part about this movie is talking about things that you don't want to spoil for someone else. Like you don't want it would have been great, and I'll talk about spoil culture. I think we'll just go into spoil culture. So I'm gonna start dropping some spoilers for the movie. So if you want to see it still and you don't want to hear anything about it, that's my suggestion. Don't hear anything about it. Like I knew a few too many things, and honestly, it lowered the experience for me for the movie. Still had a great time with it, and it's still good to see those things happen. But it would have been great not seeing or not knowing it was going to come. Right? I didn't know when it was going to come in the movie and stuff like that, but it would have been great if I didn't know anything at all. And I think that's a good approach for most movies, pretty much every movie, but this one especially. So yeah, if you're planning on seeing it, then you can kind of pause and come back to this episode after you've seen it, or if you've already seen it, you can keep listening, or if you're never going to see it and you still want to keep listening to me talk about it, I guess stay on the episode. Keep downloading the episode. I mean, we talked about where you can find the podcast, but anyway, so I'll get into some spoiler stuff. I want to talk about basically there's a bunch of characters that from previous Spider-Man movies that show up, and they were nearly all spoiled for me. I mean, I pretty much knew every one of them. You can see if you've seen any of the trailers for this movie, you can see all the villains that are going to come, and they pretty much tell. I'm trying to think if there's a villain. No, they tell you all of them that come in, which is a little disappointing. And then I don't know, and this goes into kind of the theater experience. It ties in because I don't know how many people. I don't want to say like common people because I don't mean that, but like people that aren't keeping up with the movie news industry. How many of these people were spoiled by the fact that we were going to get previous incarnations of Spider-Man in the movie? Because we knew basically the premise of the movie is like there's a lot of Tom Holland's Spider-Man is trying to kind of reverse this outing that he had from Far From Home, that that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and the negative effects it has on him and his friends. And so he goes to Doctor Strange and he's like, hey, can we get rid of that? Can we erase from everyone's minds that I'm Spider-Man, that Peter Parker Spider-Man, really make my life and my friends' lives easier, and my family, and whatever else. And so Doctor Strange is like, I don't know, it's a little complicated. I don't think we can do that. And we'll try. We'll give it a go. And Peter, does his thing, and he screws it up a little, and Doctor Strange shuts it down. And he's like, all right, so we're not going to do that again. I mean, just we'll put that away, and we'll talk about this later. And then they realize, oh, shoot, like a few strains from other universes have come through, because Peter was trying to say, oh, I still want Aunt May to know that I'm Spider-Man, or that I'm Peter Parker. I still want, MJ to know, and Ned, and whatever else. And Doctor says, whatever. I'll try to throw those in. But like, eventually he realizes people that do know he's Peter Parker have come from other universes, and that's where we get that's where we kind of get going, because we realize that characters from the previous Sony Spider-Man movies, you got the Sam Raimi ones and then the Mark Webb ones, which Sam Raimi ones are the Tobey Maguire, and Mark Webb's and Andrew Garfield. Some of those villains and other characters are going to come through, and then that's when you see all those villains from the trailers. You see Dr. Octopus and Sandman and whoever else, Electro, Green Goblin, and the Lizard. And so those guys come through, and one at a time, obviously, because that's how you make a movie. And then later in the episode, so Peter Parker's trying to capture them all, and then he's like, you know what, I don't want to like just get rid of these guys because they're all gonna die, right? And basically they're tying in that continuity where like these characters when they go back to their universes, they're going to go back to, what happens in their movies, where you see Otto Octavius die, with his reactor in the water. Green Goblin dies, getting impaled by his impeller, or by his, whatever it's called, not impeller, his glider, and so on, right? Right, Electro dies. I'm pretty sure Electro dies. Yeah. So, and Sandman. And so what we see is Peter try to kind of fix them. He's like, oh, well, they're only going to die because, like, of their personal and mental problems, and some of them physical problems, right? So what if we try to fix it? We try to, like, fix Octavius's, chip in the back of his neck, so he's not controlled by his arms, and similar things for the other guys. Electro can control his electricity, and stuff like that. Sandman, we can get rid of his sand stuff so he can go see his daughter, right? He's still about seeing his daughter. His main goal in life is just, I want to be with my daughter, which, for fine. But the part that I want to talk about that I didn't want to get spoiled, and I kind of knew, or I didn't know that that's what they were going to do, but I knew those characters were going to be in there, which, again, it would have been nice to see, like, that bridge scene. And again, it's in the trailer, but I wish that wasn't in the trailer, right? I mean, I guess what I'm going to backtrack here, because I don't know what you do for a trailer without spoiling some of this, because the villains show up fairly early in the movie, within the first hour of the movie. They're there. It's a long movie, too. It's like 2.5 hours, so, buckle up. I could hear some restlessness kind of toward the end. But, yeah, so you could see, I don't know how you make the trailer without Octavius in there. Maybe you just tease everything, but you got to get butts and seats. But it's, it would have been really cool to see him pop out on the highway, and then Green Goblin show up, and characters like that. It would have been cool to see for the first time in the theater. And then we get to the huge reveals that they bring back. I guess, I guess they were trying to keep this a secret, but Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire do come back in this movie, and I think it's kind of interesting to, again, going back to the theater experience, you could hear, first of all, they start with Andrew Garfield, because Ned, who realizes he can open portals, because he gets the ring thing from Doctor Strange that you can open portals, so he's like, I want to see Peter Parker, and he just waves his hands and creates a portal, which is a great bit. It's a great running gag throughout the movie, that he might actually be able to be a magician or wizard, whatever they call him. I don't remember exactly the right word, but sorcerer, whatever. And so Ned opens a portal, and you see the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man come through, and I heard a few clapping, like maybe 5 to 10 people were cheering and or clapping. And again, this is a pretty packed theater, so I was like, you'd expect to hear, or you expect to hear more applause for, like, a major character coming back through, coming back to play Spider-Man. We really don't see that much, where characters from years ago come back and play Spider-Man again, because we were all pretty sure that, like, Sony had moved on. They literally recast Spider-Man, so it should have been a bigger surprise. But I don't know if it was just the audience that I was with was maybe had already seen the movie, or it's just the Wednesday after it's come out, so presumably there's some people seeing it the second time. Maybe they just didn't care. They're not big cheers. They're not gonna make a big scene. Maybe that's it, or it could just be that they were spoiled by this, just like I was. And I didn't even look for this information, but some of the stuff that comes across, when I'm on the internet, I see it, and that would have been, and these people, I get that you have a job, you gotta find your scoops and stuff like that, like that's your whole job is getting that, but it definitely took away from the experience of the movie for me, and that would have been nice to see for the first time on the screen, as opposed to going in and saying, like, all right, when's Garfield going to show up? Because as soon as Garfield showed up, I was like, all right, well, then they're definitely going to get Tobey Maguire to come back, and then, a few minutes later, they bring Tobey Maguire in the movie. And again, like, I think they worked very well in the movie. Like, I'm not upset that they're in the movie, I'm upset that I knew that they were going to be in the movie. Because what they do, I mean, Andrew Garfield is great. And Tobey Maguire is pretty good too. I mean, you could tell he's pretty old. But they don't try to make him young. Like, these guys are Spider-Man in now, like in the year, whatever. I don't even know when the movie's set. Let's just say it's 2021. But like, they're Spider-Man as if their universes had continued, and they plucked them out right now in time, as opposed to like prime Tobey Maguire Spider-Man or Garfield or whatever. Like, They're pulled out afterward, so that way they don't have to do some de-aging or stuff like that. Although they do some great they do some great de-aging. tough sentence to say on Alfred Molina's Otto Octavius, because he looks great. I mean, pretty flawless in terms of like looks, as young as he did in Spider-Man 2, 2005 or something, 2004, whenever it was. But anyway, so back to Garfield and Maguire. They're great. Maguire, you could tell he's like, I'm the veteran Spider-Man. Like whatever you guys need, I'm the old wise one at this point. And Garfield is like still charming. Like that was his biggest. I think that was his best strength as Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which were hit or miss. I think for a lot of people they're more miss than hit. But Garfield, I think, was very charming and had great comedic moments as Spider-Man, and then that comes through here. Like this might be his best Spider-Man performance. It's not even his movie, right? It's not even his Spider-Man movie, but he's probably better now than he was back then. I mean, he's great. You'd hope that you'd hope that they'd find a way to keep him going, or maybe Sony will. But I thought he was great. Maguire looks like he was talked into it by the other guys, and he's like, all right, I'll come back. He's clearly. I mean, neither is clearly doing their action scenes. I mean, even Holland is probably not doing his action scenes. So but it's still fun to see them, even though it's all CGI. It's still fun to see them swinging around, and then they land and they take off the mask, and like, whoa, that was crazy what I just did. And I'm like, all right, it's stunt double and or all special effects, but all right. But it's great to see them, and they're fighting the villains at the end. And I'm not going to belabor the details of the plot because I think it's a good. I think I don't think it's beneficial for this podcast, but also, you can go watch the movie yourself if you're interested. I don't know if this will be like on Disney Plus in a few months or something like that, because it's a Sony movie technically. But I don't know how they're going to handle that. Like as far as watching it at home, if you don't want to go to a theater. But for at least the next couple of months, you're going to have to if you want to see it, and I think it's a great time. Like I said, Maguire and Garfield are great. They have great chemistry with Holland. They teach him things. They help him grow as Spider-Man, and kind of this brings me to my last point here, and I'm making good timing on this episode. But the future of the franchise is kind of in question because they basically erase a lot of what happened already. At the end of the movie, Peter goes to Doctor Strange, who's like, oh, the multiverse is breaking apart. I mean, we got a lot of, I don't know how I'm going to contain this. And Peter's like, well, just erase the fact that everyone knows, or basically erase me from existence. Like, no one knows who Peter Parker is. They still know Spider-Man because you still see the J. Jonah Jameson, who's just great throughout the movie, by the way. Pops in all the time. And you could hear, and there's one scene where he shows up where he shouldn't, and I could hear an audience member go like, oh no. Just like, this guy's up to no good. But you hear J. Jonah Jameson talk about like, oh, Spider-Man's still out there. It's been a few weeks since he defeated Jake Gyllenhaal. Wow, I'm blanking on his name. Starts with an M. The only word I can think about right now is Mephisto, just because I heard someone say that recently. It's just funny, but I'll get the name for you guys in a minute, if I can. Let's see. Great content right now. As I stall, Mysterio, Quentin Beck. Just blanked on that for a minute. But anyway, so you get Spider-Man still exists, but no one knows who Peter Parker is. His Aunt May is gone, by the way. So she's gone, and that was a good moment for him. We haven't really seen him have kind of his Uncle Ben moment. All the other Spider-Men have done that, but we assume that Uncle Ben. We kind of assume that he already had his Uncle Ben moment because there is no Uncle Ben in this iteration of Spider-Man. But what we kind of, what Sony and Marvel kind of shows is like, no, actually his Uncle Ben moment is his Aunt May moment. So she's gone, and that really tortures him. But he's able to. But what we see at the end is no one knows who Peter Parker is. Jon Favreau walks up. He's like, yeah, or Happy Hogan, comes over. He's like, hey, who are you? So he doesn't know. No one knows. And MJ and Ned, they do get into MIT. We have this nice moment where Peter goes up to him and he's going to tell them who he is, but he realizes, you know what, they're happy. They got each other. They still, they're going to MIT and I'm not. And, perhaps it's time to move on to bigger and better things. So we see him leave, and he kind of goes on to his own. We see him move into this crappy apartment, kind of like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man style. It reminded me of that, where he's living in this crappy apartment. He's got to pay rent, stuff like that. And, maybe he'll get a job at as a pizza delivery driver in the next one. But it does kind of raise the question of, like, what's next? I assume that they'll do kind of like a Fantastic Beasts method where they make Zendaya and MJ and Ned remember who he is, just because, like, those characters are great, and I'd love to see more with Ned, especially with the sorcerer stuff, and MJ obviously is a great partner for Peter Parker. They did a great job there. I can't imagine that they're just going to, like, write them out of the movies now, or that they're done. From what I understand, they've already greenlit a fourth movie. And I don't know if it's going to be in the MCU or whatever. I mean, I assume it would be, because they're just so successful. This relationship has been so successful. Sorry, I don't know if that came through. I'll try to edit that out. But yeah, I'm hoping that they kind of continue in a positive way. We kind of set up, like, we got a Venom setup, which I don't know if I want to see more Venom. We've already done that. We literally have Venom movies. I don't know why we need more Venom if it's not even the Venom that we know, because we see Tom Hardy's Venom go back to his universe. So I don't know. I don't know what they do in the future, but it's definitely exciting. I'd assume that they're going to come back with another Spider movie in 3 years or so. I don't know if Tom Holland's going to appear in non-Spider-Man movies in the MCU. I don't know what his specifics of his deal is, but he's always great. It's always great to see him. But yeah, that's kind of it. That's Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm still trying to think about what No Way Home means. I'm assuming it means, like, no way, and then they had to get home in there, right? Because, like, no way is like, no way they got all these old characters. But again, it wasn't like nostalgia. They incorporate the villains. He's trying to help the villains, help them out, and then Maguire and Garfield are able to help Tom Holland's character out. So they all serve a purpose. They're not just there to be there to have a big fight and then leave. Like, they actually are useful. So yeah, that's Spider-Man No Way Home. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'll see if I can get a guest for next week's episode. It might be another solo one, or I'll trick someone into doing it. So thank you for listening.